Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are here to discuss the persona of the recently deceased Pinky Brown in light of recent findings. New information regarding his upbringing and social history has just surfaced to the panel, which has given us more insight to the effects of his past on his present character and actions. Pinky Brown was no mere juvenile delinquent. He was a deeply troubled individual whose callous rejection of his wife's unconditional love, disregard of his gang members' loyalty, and twisted Catholic beliefs marked him as an outsider. However, as his life began to get more complicated later on, he had said that he had driven too far down a road he only wanted to travel a certain distance, which only raises the question, just how far down this road had he intended to travel, and had he any control over how his life eventually turned out? Currently, I am passing out a psychological report concerning this case. Should at any time during the hearing you find yourself needing a refresher on Brown's death, please refer to the incident report located directly beneath the examiner and patient tables. To recap, just 1 week ago, the Brighton Police Department received a call from Miss Ida Arnold regarding a possible murder. One of our uniformed officers accompanied her and one other individual to the location of Brown and his wife, a local waitress named Rose. He was found giving her a vial of vitriol acid and the promise that he would follow her shortly afterwards. However, in reality, Brown was using her infatuation with him to manipulate her into committing suicide. This was done in order to confirm her silence about his role in the murder of Charles Fred Hale, since Rose was the only individual who knew of the flaw in Brown's alibi that could possibly incarcerate him. Upon Arnold's and the officer's arrival, Brown panicked and threatened them with the acid. In the moment, he accidentally splashed his own face and subsequently lost his footing as he reeled from the pain. Brown fell to his death off the cliffside. The referral question for this case is as follows. Brighton PD, as a result of much public outrage, is calling into question whether Brown's actions can be held against him, or if his traumatic upbringing in Nelson Place are to blame for his actions. While no trial can be held for the dead, both Brighton PD and Child Protection Services require a psychological evaluation of the individual to discern both the influence of the quality of life in several developing areas of Brighton and whether preventative action must be taken for the rest of Brighton's less fortunate youth who may follow in his footsteps. This report will discuss the evidence to support the argument that Pinky Brown's vulnerability caused by his traumatic upbringing, which includes A, his parents' indecorous and public display of intimacy, B, residence in the poverty-stricken Nelson Place, C, contradicting Catholic lifestyle, and D, blind isolation to former criminal gang leader Kite, has led him to be trapped in this background and lifestyle. These four main aspects will be discussed as 1. Family history, 2. Previous residences, 3. Religious affiliations, and 4. Social history. Please turn to the page to section 1, family history. Growing up, Pinky Brown and his parents inhabited a cramped room in Paradise Peace. Because it was so small, it was normal for Brown as a young boy to witness from his single bed what he dubbed the frightening weekly exercise of his parents. As a result of regularly witnessing his parents bouncing and plowing, aka having sex, every Saturday night as a child, he was plagued by an unnatural aversion to love and intimacy. He knew everything. He watched every detail of the act of sex. You couldn't deceive him with lovely words. There was nothing to be excited about, no gain to recompense you for what you lost. Brown suffered from psychological issues relating to sex, which ultimately led to his attitude towards women and intimacy. While the rest of his gang regularly drank and engaged in sexual intercourse with other women, he shrugged off their invitations and remained a virgin until marriage. When the time finally came for him to consummate his marriage to Rose, he said that the sexual act seemed to him more like death than when Halen Spencer had died. Afterwards, he reflected on the experience with a myriad of negative words, including horrified fascination, hatred, disgust, and shameless, to name a few. However, even though he was disgusted by thoughts of sex or physical closeness with anyone, he pretended an attraction to her throughout their marriage. It was exceptionally difficult for him to keep up this facade, though, because he'd never yet kissed a girl. He knew nothing about women and was aware all the same of this horrifying ignorance. Later on, during an outing to the country, when he saw just a bit of Rose's exposed thigh, he felt a prick of sexual desire disturb him like a sickness because he didn't want that relationship with anyone. The double bed, the intimacy, it sickened him like the idea of age. This idea of age refers to his disgust for his youth because, alongside his disgust for intimacy, he believed it hindered him. Another reason behind these psychological issues could be his struggle to appear like a man worthy to lead his gang and not the young, incapable boy everyone believed him to be. Throughout his life, Brown struggled with intimacy because he believed that that was what they expected of you. Every Pauline he met had her eye on the bed. That was how they judged you, not by whether you had the guts to kill a man, to run a mob, or to conquer Corleone. He was constantly trying to prove himself to others. As a gang leader who was much younger than everyone else, this expectation of intimacy frustrated him. He did not have the years of experience with women because he avoided them due to his past, and thus did not feel comfortable around them as he was expected to be. Another hurdle for him to overcome in order to prove his worth. Let us now move on to section 2, previous residency. As a result of being suppressed by his hometown, the poverty-stricken Nelson Place, Brown inherently suffered from his own failure to achieve his aspirations and grew to resent his past. While both he and his wife were products of Nelson Place, Brown harbored a deep hatred for and reluctance to either visit or talk about his childhood home, unlike Rose, who was living in the past. There are 3 recorded instances where Brown mentions his former home in Paradise Peace. 1. In a conversation with Rose. 2. When he hides in the garage after the attack at the racecourse. And 3. On his way to Rose's parents to ask for her hand in marriage. In all of these instances, it is obvious that he abhors his past and wishes to separate himself from his poverty-stricken roots that denied him the chance to live a happy life. An awful resentment stirred in him. Why shouldn't he have had his chance like all the rest? His disreputable background shaped his conduct of life more than he would like to admit. It held him back, just like his age and fear of intimacy, causing him to lash out later on. Please continue on to the next page regarding section 3, religious affiliation. Throughout his life, Brown retained a religious belief in morality, which led to his sense of good versus evil, which was set in contrast to Ida Arnold's perception of societal right versus wrong. Arnold served, above all, as the counterpart to not only his position, but also his character. Their 2 distinct views of the world frequently clashed, the secular outlook of Arnold against the religious perception of Brown and Rose. The major struggle is not between the forces of society and crime, but instead between good and evil, which are the categories in which Brown divides the world. This is the view which he shares with Rose, the other Roman Catholic character, which suggests that it is perhaps their religious affiliations which led to their firm belief that this measurement is much more significant. Before continuing on to the final section of the psychological report, we must acknowledge how Brown's traumatic upbringing intertwined with his twisted Catholic beliefs. He continued to commit mortal sin and did not seem to consider the possibility of heaven. He simply believed in hell, and his character was portrayed to be almost like the Antichrist. Pinky Brown was deeply Catholic, but in a twisted, tainted way. As opposed to the traditional Roman Catholic belief in the Holy Trinity in heaven, Brown simply believed in hell. It is quite ironic that when the boy was a kid, he swore he'd be a priest, especially considering his involvement in the death of 2 men and his comments to both Rose and Dallow about hell. To Rose, he proclaimed, "Of course there's hell, flames and damnation." To Dallow, he declared, "Credo in unum satanum," translating to "I believe in one Satan," which takes from the original phrase in the Nicene Creed, "Credo in unum Deum," I believe in one God. Throughout his life, there is little evidence to show that Brown had a conscience, and he even considered himself to be damned, making frequent reference to hell and damnation. Furthermore, the recurring hellish imagery of the sea as a backdrop for his activities only added to his perverted beliefs. However, it is ironic that he never found peace in the activities other members of his gang took part in. He found no solace in sensuality and no release in ordinary vices such as drinking or smoking. Instead, he avoided these at all costs, almost as if he were some holy sinner above the rest. Brown's Catholic background haunted him throughout his life with a growing sense of eternal damnation. Still, he wildly hoped that there would be a chance for his repentance and salvation. In fact, throughout his life, he made many references to the stirrup and the ground. The stirrup and the ground refers to the idea that a sinner will repent at the very last minute of their life, as in between falling off the horse or the stirrup and hitting the dirt, the ground. Brown, the quintessential isolate, functioned under the blessing and curse of a twisted sense of being caught between the stirrup and the ground, always treading on the edge and struggling to stay on top and prove himself. Even until the very end, he had said that even if death came suddenly, driving home tonight, the smash of the lamp post, they were still between the stirrup and the ground. Unfortunately, it was too late for Brown. He kept pushing it and died before he had the chance. The idea that Brown may be almost like the Antichrist or the devil is conveyed at first through his phone number. On his first date with Rose, he told her that she could reach his phone number by dialing 36s, which is more commonly recognized as the devil's number, 666. He also saw himself as a full-grown man for whom the angels wept, which is similar to what happened to Lucifer, a fallen angel who was cast down from heaven by God. Additionally, when he bargained with Mr. Wilson, Rose's father, for her hand in marriage, it was almost as if he was trading souls, a common feature of the devil. Furthermore, he married her knowing it was a mortal sin, and that he condemned Rose's soul to eternal damnation. Later on, when he entreated her to commit suicide with him, she recalled that she felt she was signing away more than just her life. Also, in his final moments after splashing himself with the vitriol acid, he is described to have looked half his size, doubled up in appalling agony. It was as if the flames had literally gotten him and he had shrank into a schoolboy. It was as if he'd been withdrawn suddenly by a hand out of any existence past or present, whipped away into zero, nothing. The imagery created by the phrase, as if the flames had literally gotten him, connects him to the devil himself, who fell from heaven with flaming hair. Furthermore, his shrinking body associates with the image of a young boy that was often what others saw him as, to emphasize his youth and experience in the world, which ultimately led to his death. Finally, the hand that withdrew him out of any existence past or present, it symbolizes the hand of God that took Brown's life away. Finally, Section 4, Social History. Brown's male role model was former criminal gang leader Kite, who was murdered several weeks prior to the incident. All these events were set in motion after Brown's orchestrated murder of Hale, who had played a key role in Kite's death. This perhaps offered additional explanation for Pinky's decision to pursue a criminal lifestyle and still remain in it after Kite's passing. In addition to that, the constant reference to Brown as the boy reflected his youthful immaturity and vulnerability, and could also be a valid explanation as to why Kite influenced him so much. Throughout the events of this case, there have been many incidents where Brown has been described using diction that portrays him as youthful and vulnerable, even though he had tried his hardest to play the part of adults. Not only had he been said to speak in a high, broken adolescent voice and have young lungs, but he would also often encounter impediments that resulted from his youth. Too young, that was the difficulty. He struggled to prove himself worthy as a gang leader, not only to his own gang, but to others like Corleone as well. He was also patronized by a manageress at Snow's Cafe who caught him and Rose in the back. She told him, "You're both too young for this sort of thing." From this, we can analyze the persona of Pinky Brown, whose blighted childhood and repressed sexuality combined to create a misguided force of evil, or wrong, as Ida Arnold would say, both fascinating and repelling. Brown does not simply reject chances for change, but rather he is forced to continue as a criminal, as he is trapped by his own background and lifestyle. He did not know of any other way of life. He did not simply come into this world a killer, but rather he was molded and trapped by his unfortunate circumstances. Thank you very much for your time today. I and the rest of my team look forward to hearing from you very soon.